most people obviously, if not all, I know I am, are very anxious and very angry about this data breach. And I think the one thing I want to point out is you can be as sure as eggs is eggs, this is a significant breach, because the National Crime Agency and the National Cyber Security Centre would not be involved if it wasn't. So we're not talking about a couple of old trots, name and address that have gone missing. You know, this is a significant breach. It affects current members, ex-members, donors, Labour union affiliates. Even there is rumours, voters, where doorstep canvassers have gone around trying to get hold of, you know, information about whether people are going to vote Labour in the you know, local election or general election, even voters' information. So it looks as if it's quite a significant breach. Now, Labour, I think it's fair to say, have got a very cavalier attitude towards Labour, you know, policies regarding data retention and data protection. And I think in this particular case, the Information Commissioner's Office are also at fault, because they have repeatedly been informed, you know, complaints have been made to them over the last 5 to 6 years about the issues with Labour and the data policies, and they've done nothing. All you ever get from them is, oh, we'll just monitor, you know, what's going on. And of course, you know, had they been more robust in you know, doing some enforcement on Labour, I doubt very much that we would be in the situation that we are today. And I just wanted to give 2 brief examples of the relationship between Labour and the ICO. So, as most of you will know, who know me, I assist people who've been suspended. I represent them at their hearings, both at NEC and NCC, which is National Constitutional Committee level. And one gentleman who had an NCC hearing, I told him to get a subject access request in, which he did, and it came back, and I was horrified by what I saw. This gentleman didn't have a common name, but it wasn't sort of highly unusual, slightly unusual maybe, but there were 4 other people's details in that subject access request. There was a person who was not a Labour Party member, but who had been a donor. There were his bank details. But what horrified me, and I still cannot get my head around it to this day, those of you who know about football, and probably those who don't, will know that football clubs have nicknames. So in Cardiff, where I am, Cardiff City Football Club is called the Blues, the Bluebirds. And down the road, you've got Swansea City Football Club, they're called the Swans or the Jacks. And, you know, so most football teams have got a nickname. So there was this document, and it said Operation Watched, and a nickname of a football club in this particular area. And the Labour Party had a Sky Sports journalist with a similar name to this person who'd put in the SAR. They had him under surveillance. Why? No idea. So I got in touch with the Labour Party data controller, and I said, you need to report this breach to the ICO within 72 hours. They didn't do that, so I got in touch with those individuals myself, and I reported it to the ICO. What did the ICO do? Nothing. They did nothing. And I think over the years, you know, people have got frustrated with the ICO. But anyway, I'll come back to them in a minute. So it's pretty clear, I think, that the Labour Party are not telling people what data has been compromised, who the third party is, what their contact details are, and for what purpose people's data was given to that third party. And it is worth noting, I think, that in the last year, so from 2020 to 21, there have been five significant changes to the Labour Party policy around data protection. But they don't tell you about that. You're expected to go on the website and have a look, because we've all got time to do that, haven't we? So I want to turn to the legal position around this, and I know there are lots of people who've been talking about doing legal action and that kind of thing, but I just want to bring up a few points about the legal position. So as Duncan Shipley-Dalton, who was on the programme last week, pointed out, the Labour Party is an unincorporated association, so it doesn't have a separate legal personality. So a limited company, for example, is a separate legal entity in law, and is recognised and treated as such. But in an unincorporated association, like tennis clubs, political clubs, that kind of thing, the law says that you can only sue the General Secretary if you want to bring a claim. You can only sue the General Secretary and all the members of that club or party, except for yourself, because obviously you can't sue yourself. So what you have to look at is the legal framework for the situation that we're in. So Duncan mentioned it last week about the wrongdoing, the tort, which is the legal term for wrongdoing, being done to you. Or if it's caught by contract law, where there's been a breach of contract. And as I see it, this situation does have its feet in both camps, one in the tort or the wrongdoing camp and one in the contract law camp, because Labour members particularly have a contract with the Labour Party. And so, for example, if you've been told, we're not going to share your details with a third party, and then they subsequently go on and do that without informing you, that is a breach of contract, because the contract is invalid if the person doesn't know about the alteration. Now, there's a case that's just been heard in the Supreme Court, in the UK Supreme Court, Richard Lloyd against Google LLC. Now, this case is, and of course Supreme Court cases are binding on the lower appellate courts, but this case isn't exactly on all fours. It's not exactly the same as the situation we're in, but there's some interesting information has come out of it, because very often it's the judge's commentary and the analysis after that's useful. So this decision blocked data protection class action. I mean, we don't have that in the UK, of course. We have group litigation orders or sort of proceedings, combined proceedings, which is usually to do with competition law. Now, I looked at the judge's commentary, and I also looked at the analysis by lawyers about what came out of this case, and I found a couple of interesting things. Now, Article 82.1 of the General Data Protection Regulations provides that a person who has suffered material or non-material damages as a result of infringement should have a right to receive compensation for the damage suffered. And in addition, recital 85, which is another part of the GDPR, says a personal data breach may, if not addressed in an appropriate and timely manner, result in physical, material or non-material damages to the natural person, such as loss of control over the personal data, limitation of that person's rights, discrimination, what's the other thing? Sorry, I've just written some stuff down so I don't forget it. Identity theft or fraud, unauthorised reversal of pseudo-anonymisation. And you'll remember, Crispin, that poor lady last week on your programme who had been the victim of domestic violence and did not use her real name in the public domain, but had given her real name to Labour on the proviso that they would keep it safe. She is absolutely beside herself because she is worried that this will get out into the public domain and have implications for her. Similarly, you've got loss of confidential personal data protected by professional secrecy. So when you have a political opinion, that is more sensitive data than your name and address even. It has to be, there's a higher standard of protection around it for the data controller. And very often you've got people who work in government organisations where it's not, they don't tell you you can't be a member of a political party, but they don't want you to broadcast it. So you could potentially have people who are members of Labour but don't want their employer to know about it because it could have implications for their job. They're worried about that data being leaked. And then the recital 85 goes on to say, or any other significant social or economic disadvantage caused to the natural person involved. So what about breaches then, where in relation to data controllers, where data has been compromised because of a cyber attack, and that's sort of the area we're in? Well, if there's been a failure to take appropriate technical and organisational measures to protect personal data, which is different circumstances from the Lloyd against Google case, then individuals notified of a data breach suffer distress. That's a given, either because they fear that their data will be misused by criminals, or because it has been misused by criminals, for example, to commit identity theft or to send unwanted spam emails. So the question of liability turns on not what the data controller did with the data, but what they failed to do to protect it. So that's the area we're in. So if liability for breaching the data in that way can be established, the question then will turn on what damage the data subject has suffered as a consequence of that failure. Those are the two limbs that you've got to concentrate on: the failure to protect the data and the damage caused to the natural person. So now we're firmly back in the tort or wrongdoing camp. And what I want to say about the legal action side of things is please, 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 please do not think, if you engage the services of a lawyer in this matter, that that lawyer is going to morph into a private detective, because they won't. You have to get the proof to them. You have to give them the evidence. And it isn't enough to say that something happened. You have to show that it happened. Evidence is a necessity and not a luxury. So what my advice would be is get your SARS into the Labour Party. And what you need to ask them is, what data has been compromised? Who is the third party? What are their contact details? And why did you give them the data? Labour have got 30 days to respond. And if they don't, what you need to do is issue a reminder, because you have to have a straight line on the journey between you and a judge sitting in a chair, and that the judge will want to know that you've done everything you can to exhaust that organisation's internal processes around this. So you send a reminder, you be polite. Oh, I haven't had a response. I'm reiterating it again in case the original has gone astray. Be nice, you know. And then if you don't get a response back in a reasonable time period, and stipulate it of 10 days, I require a response from you in 10 days. If they don't come back, you complain to the ICO. Because what will happen is, when you start involving other organisations, you put pressure on them. And the other thing you need to do as well is you need to report suspicious emails, texts or messages to actionfraud.police.uk or report@phishing.gov.uk, and you need to take screenshots of the emails that you've had. Please, please, please do not click on any links in the email or the message, but block the domain and block the sender, because a lot of these scammers, they use what they call an onion skin browser, and it picks up different IP addresses and pings them, so you can never pin it down. But if you keep blocking the domain, eventually they will start to reduce. And you tell these organisations, I'm a member of the Labour Party, or I'm an ex-member, the data has been breached, we've been notified, and this has now happened. And what will happen then, these government organisations, they're very governed by stats, and flags will start to pop up on the system, and then they will have to put in resources to deal with what is identified as a trend within that organisation. If you notice any suspicious activity on your bank or credit card, you contact the fraud contact of the bank or credit card company, and obviously keep an audit trail of that, because we're thinking of information that we maybe need to give a lawyer if you engage the services of one. If you get any funny phone calls, register yourself with the telephone preference service, because what happens then, if organisations attempt to ring you and don't check if you're on the TPS, they can be fined up to £5,000. Do all you can to protect yourself and your data. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention last of all, I think, Kristen, I'm just checking I haven't missed anything, is that some of the things that I've done very quickly. So the National Crime Agency and the National Cyber Security Centre, they've got links to GCHQ, so they're exempt from freedom of information requests because of national security. That's fair enough, but the ICO is not exempt from FOI. So what I've done, I put a freedom of information request into the FOI. If you want to follow it, I'll pop up details on the chat in a mo, and you can follow the request and see all the updates. And I've said to them how many people are affected, what data, what is the type of data that's been compromised, what's the name of the third party or parties, and what are their contact details, and what are you doing about it, what action are you going to take. So the chances are I won't get the information, but I might find out how many people are affected, for example. Because what I think may be happening is, I think that either the National Crime Centre has said to Labour, don't give the details of the third party because it might spook the criminals who are holding this data, because they think it's a ransomware attack. That seems to be, it's got the hallmarks of that, where they keep the data or deny access to it until you give them money, and then they give you the access back or give you the data back. So that might be the case. Or what is more likely, somebody has mentioned, is that the third party or parties, their lawyers may be talking about this question of liability, and this might be why things are taking a little bit of time to get sorted out. I mean, I'm not sticking up for the party. I think they can do much, much more than they've already done. But I just wanted to mention that. The other thing as well is if you are in a union and your union is affiliated to Labour, get onto them. What are they doing about it? Unison, Unite, GMB, ASLEF, the Musicians Union, all of these unions are affiliated to the Labour Party. And when you pay your subs, a proportion of those go to the Labour Party. Get on to them as well. Keep on, keep on, keep on, keep on. Be a thorn in their sides, because if you sit there and expect things to come to you, that is never going to happen. Of that, I can assure you. So I think I just wanted to get that information out to everybody. As I said, brilliant Facebook group that Tony Greenstein and James Hall have set up. What they're proposing to do is to get a council's opinion, a specialist data protection barrister, council's opinion on a risk assessment around what people can do and also prospects of success. So get some definitive answers. And I think that will be really useful. Obviously, these things cost money. They're not going to do it pro bono. And so you know, there's going to be small donations made by the members of that Facebook group, and I would recommend anybody go along who is affected, ask to join the group. It went private from midnight last night because it was public before that, but there were some issues around ambulance chaser lawyers coming on and advertising their ways, and we don't want that to be detracting from what's going on in the group. So I would highly recommend anybody asking to join that. So you can find it publicly, victims of Labour's data breach. So you can find it publicly, and then you just have to make a request then to join. So worth doing that. And as I said, I post things up on Twitter all the time at Glyn B Mill, GLYNBMIL. If you want to follow me, Lady Blah Blah is my Twitter name. That's because some troll said, oh, all you ever do is talk blah blah. And I thought, oh, actually, I like that, so I'll call myself Lady Blah Blah. I did. So if you want to follow me, feel free, because I'm on there all the time, tweeting stuff about the breach. And just some information, start tagging in these agencies. I mean, yes, okay, the National Crime Agency, the National Cyber Security Centre, exempt from FOI, but they ain't exempt from Twitter. And here's a little tip for you. If you want them to know about what you're doing, tag them in. And the best way to do it is put a full stop before the @ sign. Because when you post things on Twitter, you might think you're talking like that, but actually all you're doing is talking like that. But if you put a full stop before the @ it tags in not only that agency or organisation, but also all their followers and all of yours. Handy little tip. So just keep on, be a thorn in the side, and we'll get this information hopefully. Thanks everybody.